Oi, which is hello in Portuguese. Oi, Mrs. F1.
Hello, Mr. F1. What's up? How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. How's Boston treating you?
It's good. We had a great race this weekend too.
We did. We did have a great race this weekend and so much to talk about. I feel like we need to just jump right into it
Yes,
because this was a sprint race weekend this weekend, so I feel like it feels like we got double the racing.
we did. We had two races.
Yeah, technically. One was a little short, the other one much longer. Yeah, let's start off by just jumping into qualifying. Um, Not a ton to say about it. Obviously, rain made things super interesting, but the big thing we need to talk about is our boy K Mag.
That's right. Haas on
Oh,
pole position.
oh my gosh. The words we thought never would come out of our mouths.
I
It's
know.
happened.
I
It's
know.
happened. A Haas is on pole, and not just any Haas, Kevin Magnussen, his first ever pole position in his
hmm
Formula One career. How excited were you when you saw this happen?
Oh, I would. It's the first time I was ever proud to say that I was a Haas fan because they haven't really made me proud, but I was really proud. Apparently Gene Haas turned 70 today. So that's a
Wow.
pretty good birthday present for a guy who just turned 70 and owns a terrible F1 team. They actually got a pole position.
Yeah, it
Congrats,
was,
Gene.
yeah, congrats, Gene, and happy birthday, Gene
Yeah,
Haas. But yeah, it was amazing and also shocking at the same time. I think Kevin Magnussen and the whole Haas team was just equally as shocked. I heard the radio, obviously in Q3, Kevin Magnussen was the first one out to put in like a first lap time before George Russell just ventured off the track into the gravel and caused a safety flag. And the rain just kept coming down. Um, and I could hear the radio. Kevin Magnussen asked, where am I at in the standings? And they go, "You're P1, mate." And he goes, "No, no." And he literally says, like, "Are you joking? Like, are you kidding? Are you kidding?" He didn't believe it really at first. And you can tell he was like, "I don't want to jinx it," because he said, "Okay, it's not over, it's not
yeah, yeah,
over."
yeah,
And obviously they came to the garage, and because of the rain, they eventually just kind of had to call it because
yeah.
it got red flagged. But wow, like what an awesome just outcome for qualifying. Haas looked really promising, I feel like at the beginning of this year. I think like we expected a lot from them, and they haven't been horrific. They haven't been good either. But I think this is a great way for like that team to kind of wrap up this season. Um, do you think we'll see more Haas's on pole in the future?
I don't. I'm doubtful. And yeah, there's a spending cap now, but I just think that the teams that can spend money on that stuff that fits outside the spending cap, they're always going to have a head up on everybody else. I mean, maybe we'll see another, I don't want to say fluke, because let's be real, K Mag had a great qualifying session. The fact that he
Right.
made it to Q3 in the Haas when Mick finished dead last
Hmm.
in qualifying was was impressive in and of itself. He did
Yeah.
get lucky. I mean, I think it's hard to argue. He got lucky with being the first one out, getting that first lap in Q3, and then obviously George crashing helped that, made more rain come in and kind of settle on the track. And all the teams just decided, all right, it's not worth it. Nobody's going to set a faster time than. And in that sense, K Mag was lucky, but at the end of the day, he still had a great qualifying session. I was just happy to see Gunter really happy. I think everybody's happy to see Gunter happy. And
Who doesn't
but
love Gunter Steiner?
exactly. But at the end of the day, unless there's another fluke or whatever you want to call it, I'm doubtful that we'll see K Mag or another Haas on a
Hmm.
podium in the near future.
Yeah, I have to read
Or
this
on
quote.
pole position, sorry. Go
Right,
ahead.
yeah, pole position, you're right. I have to read this quote by Gunter Steiner that he put out. It says, "When it rains soup, you need to have a spoon, and we had a spoon ready today." Like,
That's just amazing.
whoa,
What does that even mean?
I don't know. What an epic quote from the most. He is like the quote master. I
He's a
mean,
rock star.
yeah, they looked like effing rock stars this week, in the
Yes.
words of Gunter Steiner. So It was exciting. It was happy. I think those moments in F1 make the sport like that much better.
Yeah.
Seeing guys, and actually now that I think about it, we saw a lot of firsts this week, which
Yeah.
we'll get into. But yeah, just a great qualifying overall, a nice little surprise, and a nice little way to like spice up this weekend. Um, and even going into the sprint, I think we all weren't expecting Magnussen to hold that first place.
No.
But boy, did he try. He really did.
I'll tell you what, he finished in eighth and got a point. I honestly didn't think that was going to happen. I thought for sure, I know it's only what 24 laps or something like that, but
Hmm.
I was fairly confident that he was not going to finish in the top 10. But good for him for getting a point, and that helps. They're in a tight battle with AlphaTauri right now. I think it's
Yes.
AlphaTauri or
Yes,
Alfa
they
Romeo, one of them.
are. Yeah, they're in a tight race right now for eighth with AlphaTauri,
Mhm.
and we can talk about those final standing points at the end here. But like talk about even like more luck on their side. The rain helped them get that, you know, pole in qualifying. And then it just happened to be a sprint race weekend, which means extra points here are up for grabs. Like if that happened at another track where we didn't have a sprint, I don't know if they could have
Oh,
capitalized as
no,
much.
yeah, K-Mag probably still would have ended up 14th or something like
Hmm.
that, you know? Yeah,
Yeah, but way to take advantage of some of those extra points.
yep, yep.
I
It's
don't
going to be
know.
important for them.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you this question because I don't know if we've ever talked about this. How do you feel about these sprint races? This is the second year we're seeing them in Formula One. Do you like them? Do you hate them?
Well, as a fan of F2 and F3, I love them because every weekend in F2 and F3 has a sprint race. Um, I just think it's nice to see more racing in general.
Hmm.
Sometimes I think, and especially the more recent F1 sprints, they can be a little conservative. Um, and I think the way to combat that is to actually make the sprint race worth more points
Hmm.
so that it's not worth being conservative because you need sprint race um, results in order to be successful. Obviously, the one thing that F2 and F3 does differently is they do a reverse grid, so they invert the top 10. I think it's top 12 in F3, but that I'm not a huge fan of. But I think that we should be including more sprint races. I just think they're like any extra racing is better for the fan, in my opinion.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I really, really like them. I think the key to, like you said, like making them entertaining enough to watch is upping the points. There's a reason you're racing for the sprint, not just
Mhm.
for like it's essentially the
Exactly.
qualifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, obviously they're taking it serious because they still want a good grid position. But I think also making sure these sprints are taking places on tracks where overtaking is easier,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
not more common, because when we're doing these on tracks
Right.
where overtaking's impossible, it's
Right.
not fun. And like, what's the point then? Because your qualifying
Yep.
is going
It's
to
going
pretty
to be the
much be
same
where you sprint.
result. Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah. Like
I,
a
and I,
sprint at Monaco would be so boring because it would just be everyone driving in a single
yes,
file line. And
right.
that's a good point. So, I don't think blanket statement every weekend should have a sprint race, but I do think I think what we had six this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure the total this year, but we definitely had more
Yeah.
than the first year it happened.
Yeah.
But I think too, we're seeing like these are also playing a lot of a big role in some of these driver standings, where some drivers are still really fighting for points, and even in
Hmm.
the constructors, like you mentioned, Haas and AlphaTauri, it plays a big role when the things are this tight. Every point counts. So, I think we saw a lot of drivers really going for it in the sprint this
Hmm.
weekend, and it made it really entertaining,
Yeah.
um, and just fun to watch. Frankly, I think this we can like kind of talk about this now, but the teams that stood out for me for two different reasons this weekend. Red Bull surprisingly did not look great. Um, that was a little bit of a shocker. They seemed to almost take like a step back. And
Hmm.
man, the Mercs looked fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. They looked like it's that when Lewis was kind of marching his way down the field in the race, it looked like it was the Mercedes of last year when he was just blowing by people left and right.
Right.
They looked really fast this weekend. I wonder if that's scaring, you know, the other big two teams for next year.
Yeah, I would be scared if I were them.
Hmm.
I mean, they're really looking good. It's looking like they are finally understanding and putting like the pieces together with how this car can be quick and fast on track. And the Red Bulls, I don't know what it was this weekend, but they just did not look great. Max Verstappen had a pretty horrible, in his eyes and in my eyes as well, horrible sprint race. He finished in fourth,
Hmm.
which is like, I mean, we've seen him on pole, if not on, top three every race. So it was kind of strange to see him all the way back there. Some other things I wanted to mention that happened in the sprint. I feel like I want to call this weekend like the weekend of drama. I feel like
Hmm.
we've seen a lot of it this week. First, in the sprint, we saw Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso fighting. Again,
Hmm.
we've seen this. This is the first time we've seen this season. Like, what the heck is going on there with those two?
I think Fernando is just not a good teammate.
Hmm.
I think I mean, it's just shown throughout his career. He just expects, that he should be the top dog,
Yeah.
and Ocon won't take it. I mean, Ocon has always been an aggressive driver, so it just doesn't match up well with Fernando because he thinks he'll be able to walk all over him, and Esteban won't allow that to happen.
Yeah, I heard the commentator saying today, like Esteban outside the car and without the helmet on is a very kind, nice, like level-headed and kind of quiet person actually. But as soon as he puts that helmet on, it's like a switch flips and he becomes this like aggressive, outspoken kind of driver, which I mean, let's be real, all of them have that in them. Like they wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
Formula One drivers if they weren't
Yeah.
aggressive at times. Um, but we just saw them fighting, and it's kind of crazy because it's not the first time we've seen it. You would think they'd learn by now, like this benefits no one. And I know Otmar Safnar had to have a little talk with them after, and even in the race today, there was radio chatter of "do not fight with each other"
Yeah.
type of radio messages, and very stern radio messages at that. So that was interesting in the sprint. Also, whatever the heck Lance Stroll was doing in the sprint race, did you see Sebastian Vettel and him were fighting for a position, and Vettel pretty much had the right of way down the straight to come in and pass, and obviously the rule is cars with
Oh, the
like,
swerve. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
and he
They
just
threw
came
Seb into the grass.
flying
Yep.
across the track and put Seb in the grass. And I heard his interview after them asking him about the incident. Now that he reviewed it and saw it, he was like, "Oh, I didn't see him there." What?
It's sad how often we've heard that excuse from him because
Hmm.
this is like I think he did it last week too, or last
Yeah,
race.
it's not the
And
first time he's
it's
done
like, dude,
something
at
like
what
this.
point you're you're making your defensive moves way too late, and you're almost killing people.
Right. And
Well,
your
no, it
teammate
was
at that.
last week. It was last week where he swerved and hit Fernando, and
Hmm.
Fernando's car was, freaking
Yes.
vertical.
Airplane mode.
Yeah,
Airplane mode.
airplane mode. Yeah, and it was the same thing. Lance made a move way too late, and it's like, I know all these guys are good drivers, and Lance is a good driver. You need to be a good driver to be an F1, but I don't know if he's good enough because when you continuously make the same mistake, what's
Hmm.
the saying, right? It's like stupidity is making the same mistake and expecting a different result. Like
Yeah.
it's getting to a point where like Lance just doesn't look like, he's safe out there, which has to be terrifying for the other 19 drivers. Like, let's be real, almost every team can pass an Aston Martin right now, but every single driver as they're going around him, they're like, oh my gosh, is he going to swerve and hit me and throw me
Right.
into the wall? Like I would think that,
Yeah.
it's it's something's got to give, and
Yeah.
it's annoying that his dad owns the team because nothing will give. But maybe F1 needs to say like we need to give out really harsh penalties for people who make those defensive moves too late because you can really, I mean, look what happened to Fernando's car. I mean, that could have turned out way differently last week.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And his
FIA
few
needs to figure something out.
Yeah, and did that to his future teammate at that. It's interesting that you brought that up. Like, I am very, very interested to see the dynamic at that team next year. We know Alonso is
Mm-hmm.
not,
He's not second fiddle.
no, he's not.
No.
And we know that everybody that's come into that team so far has been second fiddle next to
Mhm.
Lance Stroll, just because obviously Daddy Warbucks owns the team. Do you think, what do you think is going to happen when that
That's
happens?
why that's why this move didn't make any sense to me in the first place. My guess is that Fernando will be there for 1 or 2 years and get sick of it because Lance isn't going anywhere,
Yeah.
and he'll quit.
Hmm.
Because he won't be able to handle, you know, not getting absolute preferential treatment.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is he said, and oh, I didn't see him there. Like he was already going to the left, not to
He made
block.
like 3 car lengths to the left,
Right. And I was like,
way off the racing line.
yeah, there was no reason for you to go left. You weren't
Yeah,
passing the car in front of
no,
you. So why were you going left? You'd want to stay behind that car to get the slipstream. Why? Like
it's
his
it's a
excuse didn't
terrible
make any sense.
excuse. It's a terrible excuse.
Hmm.
And if he keeps doing it, the FIA needs to give him very harsh penalties because one of these times it's going to really hurt somebody, and
Yeah.
then there will be no one to blame but Lance and the FIA.
Yeah. I agree. I think there should be something in place for repeat offenders like
Yeah,
himself.
exactly.
Um, but I thought the sprint overall was really interesting. I liked it. Didn't have, I think a sprint just adds a little bit of uncertainty and like spice to a race weekend. I think that's kind of what you need toward the end of the season, especially when the constructors and the championship's already been decided.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice little thing to throw in there because anything could happen. There's just like a whole nother section. But I mean, wow, George Russell, I just commend him for his whole performance this week.
Mm-hmm.
Just put that car, won the sprint race, essentially pole position for the race today. I I I am so happy to see him like where he is now at the end of this season. I think his consistency, he just is like, I feel like we've all been waiting for him to just kind of like win a race or
Mm-hmm.
or get like a break because he's just been so close but not close enough. And this weekend just like was George Russell's weekend. Obviously he put that on first. Carlos got second, Lewis Hamilton in third, Max Verstappen in fourth, Sergio Perez in fifth, and Charles in sixth. I think someone too, before we move on to the actual race, Lando Norris had a fantastic start to the sprint as well and was fighting for fourth at one point in the very beginning. I mean, seeing that he had food poisoning like 48 hours, 24 hours before, again, we see him like under this kind of pressure. It's almost like when he had tonsillitis. Like we see him under this sort of pressure and he's still performing amazing.
Yeah, well, he had a rough race, but definitely in the qualities in the sprint, he always pushes that car way
Mm.
further up the field than it should be.
Yeah, he put it in seventh and Daniel only finished in 11th. So again, just a weekend where you can kind of give him an excuse as to why he's not performing super great and he just still performs at the same level he's been, which I think is like the telltale sign of a really amazing race car driver, any athlete for that reason. You're able to like push past those things and still perform at that incredibly high level, which
Mm-hmm.
is crazy. I can't even go to work with a temperature, the flu. And this guy's like driving a car around, probably like just praying to himself in his mind, please don't throw up, please don't throw
Yeah,
up.
it's like the Michael Jordan flu game for those basketball fans out there. The high end athletes, they can perform no matter
Yeah,
what's going on.
definitely. All right, the race. The race, the race, the race. Wow.
It was an
I
epic race.
Yes. If you follow me on TikTok, I do like live reaction videos and like the whole first minute of the video is me like screaming because there was so much that happened so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm trying to think what was the first thing that kind of kicked this whole thing off.
The first big thing was when Danny Rick just drove into K-Mag, which
Right.
was such a shame for K-Mag to have such an outstanding start to the weekend to be thrown in the corner by Danny Rick on a stupid move that had no chance of happening. Um,
Hmm.
I feel bad for K-Mag. It was tough to watch for somebody who, had such high highs the day before to then, not even making it one lap into the race. And then obviously a safety car came out, and that is what began the madness of the rest of the race.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I felt bad for him. I feel like it would have been the perfect weekend if he could have like even finished or kept that car in the points
Mhm.
today. But man, yeah, I don't know. It just looked like Danny was not able or misjudged like how close he was to the back of Magnussen's car. I mean, we all know the brakes on this car. These cars can be a little unpredictable sometimes. I don't know if like he just didn't stop in time, he didn't brake in time, or he just misjudged because he just clipped him right in the back and
I think
sent.
he was just being too aggressive. He tried
Mm-hmm,
to take this inside line that was never going to be there because K Mag had to turn into the corner.
mm-hmm.
And of course, K Mag does, which he's entitled to do. He's well ahead of Danny Rick. And at that point, it doesn't matter how much brakes Danny Rick's going to apply. He's hitting him. And he
Yeah,
did. And then, K Mag tries to turn the wheel to get into the grass because obviously you don't want to be a sitting duck, with your car horizontal while cars
right.
are flying by. That's how drivers die. But as he does that, Danny Rick decides to try and go on the inside to pass him, which was
Mm-hmm.
stupid because again, K Mag wants to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And because he does that, they hit each other again and spin into the wall. And
I
that
mean,
was the end of the race.
there wasn't much Danny could do at that point. He was traveling so quickly. It was either just continue straight, hit the gas, and try to get out of his way. Because he couldn't go to the left. There was an AlphaTauri right next to him, and Kevin Magnussen's car is laid vertical right in
Yeah.
front of him.
Well, and again,
So
he put himself in that position by hitting K Mag in the first place. So
absolutely,
yeah,
yeah,
maybe the second, yeah, when K Mag's coming around, maybe there really is nowhere for him to go other than to just accept getting hit. But
right.
at the end of the day, that shouldn't happen because he never should have dove into that corner with that speed. He was
Yeah.
never going to make it.
And his second to last race,
Yeah. Well, he had
like,
such a good race last week, and just he was outperformed by Lando again all weekend, and then lap one, you know,
yeah,
bonehead dive that was never going to work. And it's almost like and everyone always said Danny Rick was always that guy who was late on the brakes, making crazy overtakes. But I don't know, maybe it's just the setup of this McLaren, but like every time he tries it, he locks the wheels up, he hits somebody, he can't get that car to behave like his Red Bull behaved when he was,
right.
when he was competing with Seb.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of a bummer. I also when I saw it happen, I was like, Danny, what were you doing?"
Yeah.
And then my next thought was, "No, Danny, like this is the second to last race maybe of your entire career.
Yeah.
Like
Most
why
likely.
right, why are you making risky moves like that in like what were we, the second, third corner at that
Yeah.
point?"
And of all
Um
people, he hits K Mag, like,
Right. Yeah. It was a bummer. I saw them like they got out of their cars at the end and walked toward each other. And my heart was like, oh, uh-oh. Usually when that happens, it's not a good situation.
I'm
But they,
sure K Mag said something to him along the lines of, what the heck were
yeah.
you thinking?
Well,
But like,
it seemed like Danny apologized. They like patted each other on the back,
yeah,
kind of like mutually, like, ah, shoot, dude, like that
yeah,
sucked for both of us. But that kind of started the whole thing. We had that yellow flag and that bunched up,
safety car, yeah.
yeah, safety car. That just bunched up the pack. And then I was like even more nervous. I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen now? And I feel like it was one after the other. Max and Lewis,
Hmm.
again, just going at it. And we talked about this before we kind of got on, but like, yes, they're race car drivers. They're going to fight no matter what. Like if they're racing for a championship or for a point, like they'll be like tooth and nailing it till the end. But like Lewis is fighting, I think, in my mind, like for even more. Like Max has already won the championship. So I
Hmm.
mean, he's not really driving for anything anymore. He can't lose the championship now. It's not possible. So I don't understand what the aggressive driving was there with their little collision. Um, who did you think was at fault for that?
When I first saw it, I thought Lewis didn't give him enough space. And then when I watched replays, I thought, okay, maybe this is a racing incident because they both. So like Max had the lead going around turn one. He went around the outside, was definitely in the lead. But then he had to brake really, really hard because he's got the right hand at turn 2, where, if you're on the inside, then you have to really slow down. So then now Lewis is ahead. And I guess FIA decided at that point Lewis has the corner, but it was really close to me. And to me, I thought Lewis had the space and the speed to give him room, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think he did.
Mm.
Um, so, for me, it's either a racing incident or it's Lewis's fault. And the fact that Max got the penalty, and like I said, they must have deemed Lewis owned the corner because he was ahead from the braking zone. I think that's debatable, but either way, Max ended up to get the worst of it because he plummeted all the way to the very back, and Lewis dropped a few spots.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the official rule is the nose of your car needs to be ahead at the apex of the corner. I believe that is the official FIA rule. And if I remember correctly, when they kept replaying the incident over and over again. But it did look like Lewis did have that advantage into the apex of the corner. So but yeah, I mean, I feel like you could have deemed it a racing incident as well, because I saw another replay and someone mentioned Max was kind of on the curb there coming around the corner, and it seems like he lost just a bit of stability, and that's what caused them to kind of just clip together. And that could have been it for Lewis's race, honestly. But thankfully, it sounds like the damage to his floor wasn't as bad, because I heard him come on the radio saying how much of my floor is gone.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, with the result of the race, like, he could keep speed. It didn't seem to affect him that much, which was good. Thank goodness. But that caused Max to drop back a little bit too. And again, I was like, man, the Red Bulls this week are just not here. Like,
Well, I think eventually Max looked like he had the pace to get around Lewis, but he tried a stupid overtake, an aggressive one,
right.
and it ended up sending him to the back of the grid and having to get a new wing.
Mm-hmm.
Which that's that's the downfall of driving the way that Max drives, is that sometimes you'll be so aggressive that people are scared and they back out. And other times people will call the bluff, and then your wing is stuck in their floor, and you
Mm-hmm.
gotta you know so at the end of the day, Max has to kind of say, like, this is how I drive. I tend to put people in a position of either they hit me or they back out,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
I think
and
yeah. I don't know. I think this year we've seen a little less of that type of Max.
I
Like,
think it's just because he's been so far ahead of everybody this year.
right. Yeah, that's true. I think too, like, we talked about this in a prior episode. We've seen Max's driving style and like how he is as a driver mature over the years. I think like four years ago, you could have said he was like a raging maniac. I know people were saying that too. Like, he's dangerous out there. Like, he's just a dangerous driver. And I think he's definitely matured over the years, but there are moments like this where you see, and especially
Yeah,
in
he's
my
still a
mind.
very aggressive driver, but
Mm-hmm.
he's also, it's undeniable that he's an excellent driver.
Right.
So, and I think to some extent you have to be aggressive if you're going to be an excellent driver. It's hundreds of seconds between these incredible cars, so you have to be willing to, you know, put your car in a position to make the other driver scared enough to give up their position. And Max is really good at doing that. And, he happened to make that move on Lewis, who I think Lewis saw, like, I can win this race,
Mm-hmm.
and he hasn't tasted that since last year. So there's no way he's backing out of that corner,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially for a guy who already won the championship. And I'm sure in Lewis's head, he's like, Max will back off. Like, what does he have to gain
Right.
here?
Yeah. What's he fighting
and
for?
and then all this, now we see that Max, no, he won't, and he also won't give a position back to his teammate at the end of the race, apparently. But that's just the way that he drives, and
Mm-hmm.
I think most people in F1 understand, like, look, he's going to put himself in a position to either hit me or get past me.
Mm-hmm.
And some people, a driver like Esteban, I think, would not care and put his car, willing to get hit. Whereas other drivers might just say, like, oh, it's not worth it, and back
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. I think too, like, kudos to the Red Bull team, because when he came in and did that pit stop, he had a tire change and
Yeah,
a nose change, and they did it in 10
I know.
seconds.
They
And
they are an incredible pit team. Like, they're
that
they're head and neck above everybody.
I know some of the announcers on Sky Sports were saying, I think that may be a record
Yeah.
for a pit stop with a nose change. They said it's averaging around 13 seconds,
Yeah.
which still blows my mind in general. But I mean, that's crazy. And honestly, that helped him out a lot. That gave him a little bit of an advantage over Charles Leclerc,
Mm-hmm.
who also had to come in and was also the next kind of accident that happened
Mm-hmm.
almost immediately after Lewis and Max.
Mm-hmm.
Him and Lando Norris came together, just battling it out really for a position. And oh my God, first of all, I'm shocked that Ferrari was not more damaged. I'm shocked.
I
It
know that.
slammed its front end right
Yep.
into that wall.
Yep.
Um, what are your thoughts on like that collision? Do you think that's just a racing incident as well, or do you
No,
think
no,
Lando Norris?
it was 100% Orlando, and that's why he got the penalty. That was pretty clear cut
Mhm.
that Charles was almost a full, like the pretty much a full car ahead of him,
Yeah.
and they tapped wheels front to back. Like that is almost always the driver in the back's fault whenever
Mhm.
something like that happens. So to me, it was obvious. And like when I saw him into the wall, I was like, wow, Charles's race is done. And
Same.
then I seeing him pull out of the wall, I was like, there's no way.
Yeah.
That front wing has to be not attached at all. The fact that he made it back, didn't have that much damage and was able to just get a new wing and go. I was blown away. And then not only that, but he makes it all the way to P4 by the end of the race. I mean,
Right.
that's pretty killer.
Yeah, when you see collisions like that, usually you're expecting to see like the front nose just completely wrecked. And
Yeah.
you sometimes you're also like I was expecting to see suspension issues.
Yeah.
Like you'll see some of those tires just dangling off the side of the car. I don't know how he saved that, but he did. And I felt the same way. I saw it happen and I literally was like, no, because in my eyes, these last two races are really between him and Sergio. Like that's what I'm paying attention to the most because they're both
They're
well, now
tied.
they're tied
Mm-hmm.
for a second. And like when I saw that, I literally my heart just like ripped down my chest. I was like, no, please God, like not again. Why? And then I saw the graphic on the screen go green flag. And I was like, what? He's
Mm-hmm.
he's on the track.
I know you
Um
could see him in the background pulling out. I have no idea how that was possible.
yeah, honestly, in my books today, and I this isn't honestly because I'm biased, I'm a huge Charles Leclerc fan, but like he is my driver of the day. He was at the bottom of the pack and
Mm-hmm.
somehow was able to pull that car and not lose confidence. I don't know. Like, if I were you and that happened to me, I'd be like, well, this is over. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
no way I'm making this. And to be honest, the whole middle of the race kind of like slowed down a bit. There wasn't a crazy amount of action going on compared to what was happening in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he pulled that car and finished in fourth.
Yeah.
Like, talk about a comeback. What
Him and Max just flew through the field.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I mean, that is expected because those cars have so much pace. They should be flying by everybody. But you're right. To go from pretty much dead last, minus the two retirees, to almost a podium spot. I mean, that's a killer drive for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah,
And
and I
Max had a killer drive too. But I mean, so did George, so did Lewis. They that like Lewis obviously took damage and then was able to not only you know stay towards the front, but then also battle for a win with his
mm-hmm.
teammate.
Yeah, that was really great. And I feel like we haven't seen a lot of that battling between Lewis and George this year just because it's just seemed like they're miles
Mm-hmm.
apart from each other. But that was so great to see. And I was like cheering for George the whole time. So I just wanted to see him get that first Formula One podium. And let's be real, he freaking deserves it. He's been waiting so long for
His
that.
first win. Yeah.
Yeah, and the first time like he gets in a car that's actually capable of doing so, they just happen to suck. Like, talk about bad luck. That kid probably thought leaving Williams last year, like, dang, I'm gonna be on the podium like every single race.
Well,
And
he has had a decent amount of podiums this year,
he
and he's driven
has.
really well. But yeah, obviously he hadn't had the win up until now,
I mean,
and it was
yes,
it
he's
was
had a
just a
decent.
matter of time,
Hmm.
right? I mean, yeah, that car isn't as good as Ferrari and Red Bull, although I think now it's probably pretty close. So I think they should have a chance in Abu Dhabi to end the year.
Yeah,
But
I don't know. If you told me in the beginning of the season it's only a matter of time, I don't know if I would have believed you with the way
mhm,
they looked.
yeah, well, and that's Mercedes is known for building really good cars, having really good engineers. So, I do think that lineup of George and Lewis next year, I think they'll be more competitive. I think Mercedes has a better understanding of this new regulation car. It'll be interesting to see if they can compete with the Ferrari and Red Bull.
Yeah. And I mean, overall, I think I would love to look at like Mercedes, like on some sort of chart or something, their progress throughout the season, because just again, like last race was really good for them. Great consistency and the more points they needed. This weekend, just absolutely fantastic. Again, bringing home even more points. And at this point, I mean, George needs them, but Lewis needs them as well. Even I would say even more than George at this point, because he's not had a great season. But also I found it hilarious. Toto Wolff wasn't there this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one time his team like has probably it's their best race weekend, I would say, of the whole season. The man's not there.
Yeah, by far.
Like what the heck, Toto Wolff? Like, why would you do that?
Everybody needs vacation.
Yeah. Well, he can vacation in like 2 weeks, okay? Like it's almost over. Did you see that as soon as George was in the driver's room after the race? I was like, I was like, oh, George is FaceTiming with his family. And he turns it around and it's Toto Wolff.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. He's not the first person I would call.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I found that kind of like ironic. Like the one time funny. Toto's not there.
Yeah.
And a big moment for George. Like Toto's been with George throughout his entire year. If some of you don't know this, Toto Wolff is actually George Russell's manager.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been with George for a long time now, and like they've been working toward that goal in addition to, I'm sure, becoming a Formula One champion. But like that kind of sucks that he missed it.
I'm sure he'll be there for many more wins in the future. I wouldn't be concerned if I were him.
But it's the first. The first is different. I heard George saying on the radio, "Someone bring me some tissues."
I know. I heard him say that. Yeah.
But you can see just that's why I love like seeing these moments like Kevin Magnussen's first pole, George Russell's first F1 win, like the emotion you see with these guys. Like it's like it all comes out. Like they, they're mostly very prim and proper and they keep their self in check. But then when you see these big moments, you can just see them all like just elated and also just feeling all these feelings. And I think it's a really cool moment to see as a fan, no matter who it is, to be honest with you.
And just in general, like the long-term gratification, the amount of work that all these guys put in, to get your first win, I'm sure that's got to be one of the best feelings, to know that your whole life you dedicated to the craft and, you're at the pinnacle now.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a great thing to see. I enjoyed it. I think George just did a fantastic job overall. The whole race. It was calm. He was so calm.
His start was insane. His start,
great start. And the fact that you've got your teammate and a 7-time world champion breathing down your neck. Lewis was catching him at the end there. And I thought, oh boy, like, and they both told them, you're allowed to race. Like, we're not going to stop you from racing. So I thought, oh boy, are we going to see this stolen from George at the very end here? But he just stayed calm, cool, collected, raced really, really well. And I mean, took it home for himself.
Lewis. Yeah. And, maybe Lewis had damage to his car. Who knows? But George was the better Mercedes driver today, clearly.
Yeah, definitely. So congrats, George Russell, on your first ever Formula One win. I'm glad I got to see it in live. But let's talk about, I feel like there was a lot going on at the end of this race when it came to
antics.
Yeah, I want to call this, can we call this section like a radio drama? Because there was a lot going on. Let's start with Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon. They found themselves next to each other again. Again. And I was like, oh my God, like, just stay away from each other for God's sake. Like, what are you two doing? This is like the third time during this race they were right next to each other. And did you hear the radio Ocon's engineer sent him?
Yeah, they basically told him, don't battle Fernando. And he was like, no, I'm gonna. Yeah. He's like, I got to get past Seb. I'm going to do what I can to get past Seb. And I don't blame him. Like at this point, they both need points. There's no, like, okay, so they wanted Fernando to go ahead because he had fresher tires, but like, make him pass. Like, Ocon shouldn't just have to give up because the team says so.
Right. I mean, I think the reason the team was so stern, so like the first radio message came through to Ocon, and they were pretty stern in saying, please do not fight Alonso.
Yeah.
And then Ocon responded and said, basically like what you said, like, I have to get past Seb, like I'm gonna do what I need to do. And then they came back on the radio and said, clear as day, do not fight Alonso, confirm. Like they were making him say, I will not. And I think it's just because honestly, I would feel the same way on that team. Their record, when they race each other and they come together, they like at this point right now, what the most important thing is they're fighting a race in the constructors right now, and they are very close with McLaren. So keeping both of those cars on track, especially because both McLarens DNF'd today,
right.
Or were taken out, and right, they could not risk one of them coming off that track because of their own stupidity. And I think if you look at their track record, it's more than likely that that would happen. So I don't know.
I understand that, but at the end of the day, it's like they only told one driver that, you know.
Well, we didn't hear Fernando's radio, to be fair. Like
they definitely didn't tell Fernando don't battle Ocon because he flew past Ocon. So like I get it, you know, Ocon's ahead and Alonso's on fresher tires, but at the end of the day, it's like you're only telling, like, we need all these points, so one of our drivers we need to tell to not be aggressive. That's what it looks like to everybody else, and that's not ideal.
Yeah, maybe that's what it looks like, but I know, especially they were talking to Otmar Safnar, especially after what happened during the sprint race, and he said he sat down with both of them yesterday and told them, like, enough.
Yeah, basically. I understand him saying that outside the race, but during the race, they told Ocon basically to let Alonso pass when they're both in a points fight. Like, that's tough for a driver to hear. And yeah, it's the right call because Fernando's on the fresher tires, and look what happened. He ended up finishing what, P6 or something.
Yeah, I can.
P7 or no, P5.
P5 he finished.
Yeah, P5. Yeah, he made it pretty far up. But so it's, you know, in that sense, they were able to maximize points, but it came at the expense of Esteban, and it just sucks. You know, that's the nature of the game for him. And I can understand why he would be like, no, if he wants to pass me, he needs to just drive past me.
Right.
Yeah. Like if he's on fresher tires, it should be easy. So like it should, you know.
Yeah. I agree with you. I just think like Ocon sees red sometimes, and so does Alonso. And even though they're like, he's going to pass me, like they're like, I don't, they take riskier moves to try and defend. And at this point, it's not worth it. Like, don't make that risky move on your own teammate. Like, if he's faster than you, he's on fresher tires, he's going to pass you. I'm sorry. It's just the name of the game. So don't try and fight it when you know it's about to happen. Which I think is, like I said, their track record hasn't been great when they've been battling with each other. So that was the first bit of radio drama. The second bit has to do with Red Bull. They made the decision. Max was on the better tires. First of all, Red Bull's first mistake was putting Sergio Perez on the mediums. Why did they do that?
Did they have to? Because I don't remember.
To be honest with you, I know they did. They brought him into the pits and did a change, because I remember Lewis Hamilton had to come into the pits to cover Sergio after that. But I don't understand why they put the mediums on, because all weekend, we have known that medium has not been great. It hasn't been able to heat up, get the grip, and there are a lot of drivers that have been unhappy with it in general. So I didn't understand why on his last stint they decided to put him on a medium, a tire they knew was not the quickest.
Yeah, I don't know if they didn't, like if they had to, because he was only on the same compound at the start, or if they didn't have any soft tires. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. That could be the reason, but it made Sergio become a sitting duck. When he went in for that pit stop, I believe he was in third place at that point.
Yeah, he should have had the podium for sure.
Yeah, and he just started dropping down the order. And then we hear a radio message come over the radio letting Sergio know Max is going to pass you. He's going to try and go after Alonso and Charles. to try and knock points down, because we know Sergio and Charles are in that fight. When you saw this happen, what was your initial reaction?
I mean, I wasn't surprised by that. Basically, their thought process was Max needs to pass Charles, so Charles has less points.
Mm-hmm.
And, that all makes sense. But at the end of the race, Max needs to give the position back because he's already the world champion. There's
Right.
no need for him to, there's no benefit of him finishing sixth instead of seventh or whatever the hell he finished in.
Mm-hmm.
But, just the audacity of him to think that he runs the team and no, I've already talked to you about this. Don't ever ask me again.
Yeah.
That's not how a team works, man.
Right.
You can't just, yeah, you're the better driver. It's pretty obvious, but you can't behave like that in any professional setting. You're going to make everybody on the team hate you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was weird when I heard, so obviously he didn't pass Alonso, he didn't pass Charles Leclerc. So what he was meant to do, it didn't even happen. And then when they asked him to give the place back at the end, first of all, they asked him 3 times and he just was silent. He didn't respond on the radio at all
and
until
after tantrum after he passes the finish line.
The finish line, and gives a pretty stern message, very much of the vibes of I run this place. I already told you I don't want to do this. So, but we were talking about this earlier. If Red Bull knew that ahead of time, if they've already discussed this type of scenario and Max has already said, I'm not doing that, why would you then do it? You just cost maybe Sergio Perez second place in the championship. Why would you do that?
I don't know. Max would have gotten around Checo anyway. But this is what I don't understand. There was no reason for them to say, Checo, let Max pass. Max was going to pass him. Mm-hmm. So, they could have just said, okay, guys, battle it out. Whoever, or they could have told Max, hey, look, Checo's the one who needs points here, so don't pass him.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need points, so don't pass him. That's what they should have done in the first place. But at the end of the day, it's just, if you have a driver that doesn't listen to the team, they're just going to stop trusting him to do what they're telling him to do. So as good as a driver as he is, how does this play out? Christian Horner is a pretty self-absorbed dude. So I don't understand how him and Max can be on the same team. I wouldn't be surprised if Christian Horner does something to send Max a message and be like, dude, I'm the boss, not you. So you do what I tell you. And if you don't like it, then,
I don't know. Christian Horner is so far up Max's butt. I don't think he'd even be able to crawl out to do.
Oh, no, I think Christian Horner likes himself way more than he likes Max. So
I don't know. Have you ever seen the way Christian Horner looks at Max sometimes?
Yeah, but you ever see the way Christian Horner behaves in general? The dude is very self-absorbed. And I unless Helmut Marko steps in and says no, let Max do whatever he wants, I think Max is going to get his bell rung by somebody and say yeah, you can't behave like this. We don't give a shit who you are. You can't behave like that.
Regardless, they definitely had 2 very unhappy drivers at the end of today's race. Yeah. And Christian Horner is going to need to answer to Sergio Perez as to why that happened today. And that's going to be a rough conversation if it's, well, Max didn't want to. And then Sergio is going to respond with, well, I didn't want to do a lot of the things that I did either to help Max get him to his championship.
And if I'm Sergio, from now on, I am never doing Max any favors.
Mm-hmm.
If Max is trying to pass me, I'm going to defend extra hard.
Right.
If he wants to, dive into a corner, I'm going to go into the corner. And if he's going to hit me, we're both out. It's his fault. That's his decision. I'm not helping him anymore. That's what I would do if I were Checo. And Checo said to Spanish media after the race, I'm the reason he has 2 championships. So, I don't see why Checo wouldn't say all right, game's on. I'm gonna drive you're not my teammate anymore, because you aren't. You clearly aren't a teammate. You just do whatever suits you.
Yeah. I think this is what I'm gonna call the Red Bull curse. That second seat at Red Bull has always just no one's been able to stay there.
Yeah.
And I thought for sure wow, this pairing has really worked in their favor. And I'm kind of surprised at how like little conflict they've had between the two of them. Sergio has been playing very nice and, to his point, helping Max get championships. And now I think this is going to put a sour taste in Sergio's mouth, depending on what Christian Horner says to him, because he could be like, oh, none of you are actually backing me at all. You're all backing him. I'm just
Yeah.
this pawn in your little game to help him win. And unfortunately, I think that's what's about to happen.
Yeah, and Checo's response should be like, if he's not going to be a teammate, I'm not going to be a teammate.
Yeah.
And whenever you tell me to do anything to help Max, no, I'm not doing it. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you want me to undercut to protect Max's lead? No, I'm
Yeah.
going to worry about my race.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be. Like especially with somebody who behaves like that, who, as good a driver as Max is, that was so unbelievably childish. Like, dude,
Mm-hmm.
you already won the championship. Your team already won the constructors. Your teammate is in a tight battle for second place. Your teammate also helped you win championships, and you're not going to give him one spot in a throwaway race.
Right.
It's just childish.
And now they're tied because of it. Charles Leclerc and Sergio Perez going into
Yeah.
the last race of the season are tied at 290 points. This is like championship all over again, but for second place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so I thought that was a little crazy. And then the third kind of like little piece of drama, I don't know if you call it drama, but just kind of strangeness, was Charles Leclerc coming on the radio multiple times saying, think of the championship points. And I get it.
No,
Yes,
it's
he's in a
stupid.
tight battle, maybe a little bit of a tighter battle than what Carlos is in right now, but he was nowhere close to Carlos at the end of that race. I believe he
No,
was over 3 seconds behind him.
there's no excuse for him to ask for that. You're literally asking your teammate to give up a podium
Mm-hmm.
to grab more points, even though you're both in tight races.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just because you're higher up, that doesn't get you anything. You're not battling for first.
Right.
So why would your teammate give up a spot on a podium for, especially when you're significantly slower than him? Like you said, he was 3 and some seconds behind him. No, it was just as childish as Max.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not going to get free, you know, points
Right. A
just
free
because.
place.
Yeah, like, no, you're not going to do that. That's
Yeah.
that's just. And at the end of the day, it obviously wasn't Charles's fault that he got spun out, but that doesn't mean that Carlos will be like, oh, I feel bad, I'll just give you a podium.
Yeah.
No, no. I think Carlos is like 5 points behind Lewis right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, for him to pass Lewis, obviously he wants that. He's not going to give up a position and a podium spot just so that you can be ahead of Checo by 3 points for second, which doesn't mean anything anyway.
Right.
They don't give a trophy out to second place driver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now, currently after today's race, Lewis Hamilton is in fifth with 240, and Carlos Sainz is right behind him in sixth with 234. So they're,
6 points apart.
yeah, they're definitely close. I mean, yeah, I think the comment, I feel for Charles Leclerc. I don't agree with him asking to get a free podium place. I could understand him making that comment if they were like battling the entire like last couple of laps, but they weren't. Like, even for Carlos, even if that was like going to happen, for Carlos to do that, he was 3 seconds ahead of Lewis.
Yeah,
He would have had to like slam on the brakes.
Yeah.
And like it just was unrealistic. And
it was a joke.
yeah, I think you're just starting to see like Charles Leclerc get a little bit desperate right now. I mean, let's be real. The kid has had a heck of a season. His team is single-handedly like thrown away some wins for him. And honestly, this week I could tell he was insanely frustrated, especially what happened in qualifying with them sitting around, standing there without tires for him.
Yeah.
The sprint didn't really go the way he planned either. Like, I think he's just, what I'm hearing in his voice and what I'm seeing, especially with that comment at the end of the race today, is like, I'm over this. Like, I'm over
and
it.
I totally understand that. I'll be the first one to criticize Ferrari, and I have been, because they're terrible at everything they do. But that having been said, Carlos has nothing to do with that. So why should he be punished and lose a place? Right? Yes, Ferrari has screwed Charles over all year, and I'm sure they'll continue to do so as long as he drives there, because they're boneheads. But like, that doesn't mean that Carlos should have to suffer because they've done terrible, strategy calls for Charles. I mean, they've done terrible strategy stuff for Carlos too. Yeah, they're just a terrible team in general. It doesn't matter who drives there. They'll give them terrible, they'll screw up on tire changes. They'll, do that stupid thing they did in qualifying where they just let Charles sit in the pit for 30 seconds. Like,
Put
it
him on
doesn't matter.
inters when it
Yeah,
wasn't raining.
exactly. Like, it doesn't matter who the driver is. They're going to screw him over. So, like, for Charles to be like, oh, give me a position. Like, no, they've screwed Carlos over just as much. So why should he have to give up a position?
Yeah. Yeah, I just think we're starting to see a lot of frustration come out.
Yeah,
He's been
I don't blame him.
pretty calm and cool when stuff has happened recently, like on the track that has not been his fault. This is the first weekend I think I've seen him literally calling the team out on the radio, being like, wow, thanks. Wow, thanks. Like, he really was angry this week, and I feel like I felt that in a lot of his radio messages. But he has every right to.
I totally sympathize with him. And until they fire Mattia and all, nearly everybody on that team, because they are all terrible, down to the people who change the tires, they're clearly not good at their job either.
Yeah.
Like, until that happens, these drivers are going to continue to suffer for it. And then there's going to be radio messages like Charles asking to get a free place at the end of the year because it's a tight battle when it never should have been in the first place.
Okay, well, let's calm Matt down. He's a little heated after that Ferrari conversation. But overall, I thought it was a really great race. I'm looking forward to the last race of the season. Cry.
Yep.
Like, that's crazy to say. But I think we've only got 2 left, and this was a great, in my books, this was one
really
of a great race.
Penultimate race, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Let's move on to our ending portion, which is meme podium. So Matt, bring us the memes. And as always, guys, not as always, but recently our shows are on YouTube now. So if you want to see these memes, make sure to watch our show at Mr. and Mrs. F1 Pod on YouTube. And we tweet out these memes as well on our Twitter and Instagram. If you're scared of Twitter, we're also on Instagram and TikTok.
All right, meme podium. 3rd place, bronze medal. I'm a sucker for the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, so it's an Always Sunny meme. One of our favorite episodes, Mrs. F1 and I, about living in the suburbs. I'm sure you'll see it here or there or somewhere, whatever.
there.
Yes. 2nd meme, 2nd place, silver medal, is the famous Drake meme. Max when Checo helps him, and then Max when he has to help Checo.
Everyone loves a good Drake meme.
Yes, those are really good memes. And then the gold medal is the Red Bull team breakfast, Max versus Checo. This is a funny one. That sums up exactly what we were talking about, how Red Bull treats Max versus how they treat any other driver, not just Checo. Any second driver. They are unimportant.
Yes. No, yeah, and make sure to check those out. They are hilarious, and please feel free to retweet or put them on your stories because they're good memes. You'll get a good laugh out of them. All right, we move on to last but not least, admin of the week. Honestly, guys, the admins this week, I don't know if they're like tired, they're ready for the season to be over, but I was not really impressed with any of the posts, but I'm going to give admin of the week to Haas. Mostly for all the great Kevin Magnussen content and Gunter Steiner content that came out of their pole position. And overall, just like stinking happy for that team. They needed like a win, and this was a good one. So my admin of the award goes to Haas for this week. But yeah, fun times. It's crazy. We only have one more race. But as always, guys, make sure to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube at Mr. and Mrs. F1 Pod. You can catch up with us during the week, catch clips, and also just like feel free to shoot us a DM. We'd love to talk and chat with you. If you have an idea even for the show, we'd love to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single new episode. And give us a rating if you're feeling like giving a little extra love. We'd love to hear from you. So yeah, again, coming to you from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, coming to you from Boston. We are Mr. and Mrs. F1, and we will see you next time for the last race of the season.
So sad.
Bye-bye.